Hi there, and welcome to another live. We've got the wonderful Richard Smith, the UK's top nutritionist, waiting in the wings. So we're just going to get him on and say hello to Richard. Hello there, you're muted. But it's a good start. There you go.
How is that? Any better?
Oh, that's better. That's loads better. Right. Yes. We've got lots of people already in the chat. Have you had a good week?
Yes, all good. You?
Yeah, actually, quite an interesting one. Today I was coaching someone and they're calorie restricted, and I said something to them, and she said, "No one's ever said that to me before." So I thought I'd actually just quickly repeat it, because to me it's something I say ever such a lot, and that's when you calorie restrict, you macronutrient restrict, you micronutrient restrict. And that was the bit that really got her. And she said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" I said, "Well, if you're restricting calories, not that we talk about calories, but she'd done that in, sorry, there's a lot of noise going on. But if you restrict calories, you are restricting magnesium, you're restricting potassium, sodium, all those things, and vitamins. So, and the thing is that when you talk about something in a certain way, you don't think of the implications. And just simply saying to her, right, well, that means you're restricting those important things. She totally changed how she was thinking about everything just from that one little phase. So I think, I'm full of beans, as they say, because it's really nice when you get a good result. And so we've got a really good question from Plum straight away. Do you feel like taking it, Rich? Yes, he does. Right. Okay. So we'll go straight there. And good evening to everyone. Let's do this. Right. Plum, how does inflammation cause weight gain? And thoughts on deuterium?
So in regards to the deuterium, you're probably the expert to answer that, Steve. I'll leave you come around to that one. But in regards to inflammation leads to adrenal fatigue. It damages the hormones and it leads to insulin resistance. And it's this insulin resistance that ultimately leads to weight gain. So insulin is a fat storing hormone. And when we elicit an insulin response, insulin breaks the bonds on the glycerol backbone and sends fatty acids into the fat cell. To use this fat for fuel, we need another enzyme to break these bonds because they join back together within the fat cell, the glycerol backbone and the triglycerides. So we need to release these fatty acids from the triglycerides. So we need another enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase. And this will break the bonds and allow fatty acids to diffuse back into the bloodstream. The issue with this is when insulin is elevated, insulin blocks hormone-sensitive lipase. So it blocks our body's ability to burn fat for fuel. This is why stress can lead to weight gain. So it isn't to do with calories. I think we've blown the caloric model out of the water many times, and we can circle back and touch base on this if anybody has any questions. But not all calories are created equal, and it's ultimately our endocrine system that governs whether we gain or lose weight. The endocrines are our hormones, so weight gain is hormonal based. Lots of contributing factors, things like insulin, the effect of incretins, the incretin effect, the effect of lectins, inflammation, ketogenesis, the thermic effect of food. All of these things have a massive impact on the body's ability to lose weight. The first protocol is to avoid chronically elevated insulin. And the best way to do this is to avoid two things in particular: lots of carbohydrate, because carbohydrate elicits this response. And probably and arguably more important are the vegetable oils. These vegetable oils that we consume on a daily basis are high in an oxidized omega-6 called linoleic acid. This linoleic acid damages the liver and leads to insulin resistance at a higher percentage than excess carbohydrate does. So that's how the inflammation can basically have an effect. Inflammation is when the body is in a repaired state, if you like. We're trying to repair damage to the body. This can be a good thing. When you train, you elicit that inflammation. This is what allows us to heal and repair. But it's this, and that's a natural response. The same way that insulin is a natural response, cortisol is a natural response. All of these things that we demonize and not the demons that they've been made out to be. They're all there for a reason. It's just the lifestyle that we live in modern day elicits these responses to a chronically elevated level that leads to this inflammation. And most of us suffer with inflammation. Inflammation and insulin resistance are the main contributing factors to all illness and disease that we know of. So yeah, stress can play an incredible part in regards to weight gain. But, stresses are elicited by foods we eat, the compounds that we consume, and then there are other factors involved as well, which goes beyond nutrition. And what I find is that nutrition was the segue into this lifestyle for me. And then you start to become a biohacker. You start to look at other levers to pull. You start realizing the benefit and the importance of sunlight, the circadian rhythm. You realize the benefit of correct hydration, and I don't mean just water, and so on and so forth. There's all these other things play an important part. I've been seeing a hypnotist recently, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but it's part of what she is doing is allowing me to sit down for 5 or 10 minutes every day and throw my day into a hole. Basically, any bad part of my day goes into this hole, a lid goes on, and it's sealed and forgotten about. And it's 5 to 10 minutes before you go to bed anytime, but not when you go to bed because your mind is racing overtime. And just taking that time to sit down and think you don't have anything to do, closing your eyes and trying to go into that state of meditation, I've noticed a massive improvement on my quality of life. So it goes well beyond nutrition. Anything to add, Steve?
Oh, wow. That was brilliant. Let's get me back on the screen there.
And I'm red in the face. So apologies, I'm red in the face. I've literally just come off the Stages bike, which is a common theme when we go onto the lives, isn't it? So I've just done an hour on the bike. But so
you're not going to get a free pass than talking about the hypnotist. So you got a brief minute on that?
So look, it's a big part of I'm trying to gravitate into running and cycling. I'm not a good runner and I'm not a good cyclist. But I think given the time that I've been doing, I think I've improved a considerable amount. And I would argue probably, more than most people that I know. But I want to get better. And what I've noticed is it's not my athletic ability or want to train and put the effort in. What I find is when I'm running in a race or I'm cycling, it hurts. And when it starts to hurt, you tell your body to slow down. It's a natural response. And what I noticed is when I began running last year, I would push beyond this, this limit. So I'd get to the point where it was hurting, but I just keep on pushing. And gauging by my heart rate, my ability to push harder was a lot higher going back last year. And now I seem to be more sensible. When it gets to that point where it starts to hurt in a race, I tend to slow down. And that can be a good thing when you're training and things. But when you're racing, you're there to race. And I feel that there's probably 30 seconds to a minute on a 5K race that I could improve if my mind was right, if I could power through, if I can look at my heart rate and realize that my heart and my body have that much more to give, because I know what my max heart rate is. So we run in zones. And I know that, typically in a race, I'm running in zone 3 or zone 4, and I'm barely touching, if not at all, in the top end of zone 5. So I know that there's levers to pull. So I'm going to see a hypnotist for that reason. But what it has done for me from, the back entrance, if you like, is it's allowed me to take 5 or 10 minutes each day as time for me, because my life is incredibly busy. And what she said to me is, fine. And it is difficult when you've got, family and young children. It is tough. It's very tough. But finding 5 minutes just to sit there and think about your day. And basically at different points of the day, she says, you take yourself from that day and you plonk yourself in a hole, and then you move on to lunchtime and then the afternoon and evening and so on and so forth. And if anything bad has happened in that day, if somebody's been mean to you or whatever, then they go in that hole. And I know it sounds stupid, but the power of the mind is incredible, and it is helping. It is helping. How much it's going to confer, how much of a benefit it's going to confer. And Nick, if he's listening, suggested we get T-shirts of that on, and I think we should, conferring the benefit. So I'm well up for that. We'll have to get some done for War on Health. But yeah, it's all of these other aspects, isn't it? We look at nutrition, but it goes well beyond that. So I'm trying to pull the levers on things that people maybe don't think about, you know? And look, there's way more that we can go into there, but I just think the questions are piling up. Let's knock some of these questions out of the way, and maybe we can circle back around, because there's a couple of things that I'd like to speak about if we get a chance today. One of them is fiber. I've had a few people message me in regards to some questions, and what I've done is I've encouraged them to join today, or the private group on Monday, and we can go through those. So I'll let you jump on.
Yeah, deuterium. Okay, hydrogen, and all it is hydrogen, which has a neutron as well as a proton, right? And it's known to interfere with energy processes. That's it. That's what deuterium is. If you have it in high levels, so if you have deuterium depleted water, it's allegedly better than, say, tap water or your reverse osmosis water, which is what I have. So there, full disclosure there, I'm not having deuterium depleted water. And you've got metabolic water. So when you look at ribeye, it's 70% water, okay? And that is metabolic water, and that is very low in deuterium. So this is why some people can not drink, which is, you know, going back to the 1950s, there was this researcher, you might not have heard of him, called Ansel Keys. And there was things called K rations in the army. The American army did a research report. And this is one of the things he did that was proper research. And they tried to work out what was best for soldiers to go into battle. Now, the American military are not known for skimping on money, but they certainly want to save money. All right. So they spend a lot of money on arms, but not necessarily on paying people and feeding them well. So they really wanted to do the absolute minimum for the soldiers, but make sure they could still, you know, operate in battle. And the report said that a human being needs 2.5 liters of water a day. And this has been picked up on, and this is where the 8 glasses of water comes from. But in that report, it said you can get that from food. You do not need to carry excess water. And that's true. So if you wanted to have no fluid intake, you would be going on to a low deuterium diet. That's what would happen. You would use metabolic water from the animals that have got water within their muscles. You know, I think everyone sort of knows that humans are something like 70% water. You know, so that's it. So that's my thoughts. My thoughts are that the jury's still out. But if you wanted to see whether having low levels of deuterium was good for you, you could have a couple of days with no fluid intake. Just make sure that you're eating, you know, your steaks and all this sort of stuff. See how you get on. You might feel really great. So that's my answer there. You're right about the questions piling up. So let's go into the next. I hope that was good for people. Then we've got, here we go, Herbert. Now, I think Herbert is testing your knowledge here, Richard, because obviously the first thing is magnesium sulfate. And you've got also magnesium chloride, but he's done the chemical notation of MgSO4 and MgCi12. So what do you reckon? Any tips about magnesium sulfate, magnesium chloride?
In regards to which is more beneficial?
I would imagine so, actually.
Yeah, it's so I use citrate in my electrolytes. Glycinate, I believe, is probably one of the better options in regards to these two.
The first one is Epsom salts.
So are we looking from a dietary perspective, Herbert, or are we looking for, you know, relief within the bath?
I think putting Epsom salts in the bath, I would say, yeah, topical application of magnesium can be very helpful that way, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's what percentage is actually absorbed through the skin, Steve? Is it something like 30%? or it's quite a high percentage. I may be completely wrong in regards to, but we quite often look at the skin as being a barrier, but it isn't. And I can't remember the test involved, but I did reference it recently. But these compounds do breach the skin. We're not so much a sponge, but we do absorb. In regards to which is more beneficial for topical healing, do you know, I've never looked into which one is going to confer a better benefit. Get that in there. Do you have any thoughts, Steve?
Well, yeah, I think the Epsom salt. I think Herbert might be getting really into the weeds, and I understand that because we all do. I think Epsom salts will give you a benefit in the bath, and the easiest way to prove that is to have a bath with it and see how you feel. If you've got aches and pains, one of the easiest tests for the magnesium, whether you're deficient, I haven't got a spray here, but basically, if you've got a spray magnesium, okay, and you spray it on an area of your body and it itches, you're deficient in magnesium. Simple as that. All right. The other magnesium, which is magnesium chloride, is actually used in sort of food preparation. So I really don't know why that question is about. So I think let's go on to Tom's question, shall we? And then maybe Herbert can ask a bit more. So Tom J did some bloods this week, and I have Hashimoto's. No dairy for me for a while at least. Still on the fence about eggs. How do I find out for sure if I can tolerate eggs or not? Personally, I'm going to dive in before Rich comes up with his great answer. I'm going to do a simple one. You eat some eggs and see how you get on. And if you don't feel great, they're probably not doing you good. And if you eat some eggs and you feel good, or you don't feel any different, they're probably okay. You've got to remember the amino acids in an egg are absolutely perfect. You've got the 9 essential amino acids in an egg, and they're 48% bioavailable. Breast milk is 49% bioavailable. So you've got the best thing there. Meat and eggs is about 32%. So when you're looking at an egg, those amino acids are fantastic. So there is something I say to people who are not quite sure what I mean about amino acids, and it's more when I talk about bodybuilding, but I will say this for people that are also maybe on the fence even about plants and stuff like that. If you can imagine the 9 essential amino acids were letters, all right, let's just say, the first one was L, and the second one was U, and the third one was N, and then the next. So you had all these letters, all right? So you had 9 letters for those essential amino acids, all different ones. And then you had another 11 amino acids with different letters, and you had 100 buckets with all these letters in, all right? And then you wanted to make a muscle. You wanted to make your heart muscles, let's say, and you need those 9 essential amino acids. Well, if you had 100 buckets from eggs, you would be able to spell the word lunchtime, for instance, a 9-letter word with all different. So let's say that those 9 amino acids were LUNCHTIME, right? All those amino acids. Out of 100 buckets of eggs, you could write lunchtime 48 times. With meat and eggs, you could write it 32 times. With soy, you could write it only 17 times. With most plants, you couldn't even write "le." All right, because most plants don't have those 9 essential amino acids. And what the vegans say is, but if you eat a range of all these plants, then you can get the 9 essential amino acids. Yeah, that's great, that is. But you don't need 100 buckets. You need about 400 buckets. And they're not bioavailable either, because if you take like quinoa, and the only reason quinoa is so popular is because it's one of the few plants, I think there's only 3, that have 9 essential amino acids. You also get it with anti-nutrients, phytic acid, and loads of stuff that stop you absorbing it. So eggs, that was the question. Eggs have got 9 essential amino acids. It's about the best thing you can get for your protein. If you just go to egg whites, it's 17%. So you've got 17 times you can write lunchtime out of 100. So, go for the whole egg. Go for the whole yolk if you don't tolerate the eggs. And that's the next thing I was going to say. Some people tolerate the whites. Some people tolerate the yolks only. So you could try that experiment as well, Tom. Okay. Sorry, your turn, Rich.
Do you know what? I don't think I need to add anything to that. That was a hell of an answer.
There you go, then.
Look, the egg yolk is incredibly good. We look at one of the arguments from the vegan perspective is lack of folate, which the egg yolk is full of. What else is there? Vitamin D3, vitamin K2. choline. So eggs are an incredible source of nutrients. For bodybuilding, when it comes to the activation of mTOR and leucine, it is quite low in an egg, but 6 eggs will be enough to elicit that response, which is why I eat 6 eggs when I have eggs. When it comes to eggs and having any gastro issues or any side effects, it usually comes from a protein called ovocobalamin. No, it's not. It's ovomucoid. So yeah, in simple terms, you could just remove the eggs and see if you're any better. And that's why the lion diet is always preferenced as being the pinnacle of healing and repairing the body, because we remove everything and then we reintroduce slowly. Eggs work incredibly well for me, and if I had to take those out, it would probably break my heart. What I've found since gravitating into the lifestyle, that I have become more sensitive to compounds like pork and chicken. So I eat those less. And for whatever reason, it could be the higher linoleic acid content and the fact that most chickens are fed grains, despite looking for, you try finding grass-fed chickens, it's not easy. So when I do, they're grain-fed. They don't work well for me, but I still eat chicken. I just decide not to eat as much chicken as I do with beef and lamb. Beef and lamb are the only two that don't seem to cause any issues for me. And eggs, and that's why I keep them in. So if I had to take those out, it would absolutely break my heart. But the best thing is, as Steve said, elimination protocol. Take them out, see if you're any better, reintroduce them, but give it 2 or 3 weeks. Reintroduce. If you are suffering with issues, I would say that it's probably coming from the white of the egg. That's where the ovomucoid is. Remove that and try to keep the yolk in, because the yolk is an incredible source of nutrients. But plain and simple, you can go for testing, but as Steve has mentioned many times in the past, when it comes to blood tests, we're all different. What is a normal range for me is going to be different from Steve and different from, Ben and Bob and Charlene and so on and so forth. Take it out and see how you feel.
Yeah. And if you're looking at allergy testing or skin patch testing, I had at the NHS a skin patch test where they told me I wasn't allergic to cats, even though I was allergic to cats, but they told me I categorically wasn't allergic to cats. So I went to my friend's house who has cats, and his girlfriend is a nurse at the NHS. And I said, right, your lot at the NHS just said I'm not allergic to cats. 2 hours later, I'm hacking down the motorway trying to get home, streaming and unable to breathe. So the best way is to do that sort of test, actually do it right. Andrew, now there's a big part of me wants to be very silly and playful with this question. Randall cycle, mixing carbs with fats. Could you explain this like I'm 5? What are the consequences, if there are any? I'm not going to do it like you're 5, because Andrew, I don't want to go, now imagine there's a little cell, right? But I know what you mean. You just want it really simply, right? So the Randall cycle, discovered in 1963 by somebody called Randall. There's a cell, okay, and in it, in the cytoplasm, I am doing it as layman's as possible. There's the mitochondria. There's all bits and bobs that make the cell produce energy, and you have a GLUT4 receptor in there that allows insulin in, and of course, fats can get in, fatty acids can get in, because the lipid membrane is fat, right? So it can accept glucose, it can accept fat. Now, how does the cell protect itself from having too much energy? Well, yeah, it can close itself off. It can stop the GLUT4 receptor. It can stop the receptance of fats as well. That's the Randall cycle, really, in a nutshell. Fats and glucose can go into that cell, and it can go at the same time. You can produce glycogen in the cell. Every cell is very active. The mitochondria can produce lots of ATP. You are going to get into splitting electrons and all that, but we won't get into all that because he said like you're 5. All right. So what happens is you got your cell, it's got enough energy, and you start to put too much energy in, however that is. All right. Whether it's fats, whether it's glucose is sort of irrelevant. The cell will lock out. And that's it. That's a Randall cycle. It does it. It's competitive, because glucose will want to get in there, and so will fats. All right. So there is a competition there in that respect. If you look at what the preferred fuel source is, it is fats. Contrary to popular belief, that's a fact. When you look in petri dishes, when they do tests for all cells and they give it the choice of glucose or fats, they always go for fats. Fats is fatty acids are the preferred fuel source. I'm trying not to get beyond explaining like it's 5. Right. So there you go. That's what happens. Now, this is misinterpreted as insulin resistance, but it isn't, because it's nothing to do with insulin, because it also stops accepting fats as well. I think possibly why people think it's insulin resistant is because the glucose isn't getting in. And what happens is the glucose doesn't get into the cell. It has to go somewhere. So it goes and attaches itself to the bloodstream. And so your blood glucose goes up. And then how does the body detox the blood glucose? Well, it tries to put it into cells. It can't do that because we're all locked out. So what happens next? It glycates the red blood cells. And that's how the body gets rid of the glucose, sticks it on a red blood cell, knowing that it's going to circulate, and then it's going to go to the spleen, and then it's going to get kicked into touch. That's the Randall cycle. It's really simple. There are people out there over-explaining it and talking about all the other hormones, and yes, there are other hormones that get involved in this process. Glucagon, for instance, I know a few people seem to think that's the key, but that's not new. Once we realized what type 1 diabetics were, and they didn't produce enough insulin, they didn't know about glucagon at the time. But then when they found out about glucagon, you then got this phrase called glucagon dominance, and that's been around for many years. Glucagon dominance, what happens there is you have problems because glucagon is trying to push blood sugar up. You see, so it can be a confounding factor into this thing, because those hormones need to be looked at. So type 1, type 2 diabetics, completely different when you start talking about the Randall cycle, because of the impact of lower insulin in the type 1 and the glucagon dominance, and the type 2, where they have a huge amount of insulin, and often they are injecting insulin. It does make this whole process a little bit more difficult. Hopefully that was good enough for you, but if Rich wants to dive in, happy to hear that as well.
Spot on.
Excellent. I've got a pass. That's good. Right, here we go. Oh, Matthew, we've missed him, haven't we? Are there any negatives from using dental floss? Right. Okay. The whole dental regime is because we eat the wrong way. All right. So as long as you get into your head that most people aren't eating how nature intended, then you realize that everything that we're doing, dental flossing, toothpicks and toothpaste and everything, is to mitigate eating the wrong way. That's it. So if you were born and you were breastfed and you were fed the species appropriate diet, you would have a lovely biofilm over your teeth. Your jaw would not be too small, so you wouldn't get cramped teeth. You would get a perfect set of teeth, and you wouldn't need to do anything. That's the first thing. Secondly, right, so that isn't the case. I've got terrible teeth. I've been born into a family that believed in grains and cereals and bran and skim milk and freshly squeezed orange juice and all that. And because of that, I've got crooked teeth and my jaw is too small. And basically I have to do all of those things because my teeth are cramped. So you've got to do the flossing, and you've got to do all of the brushing, and you've got to use some sort of paste or some sort of abrasive thing or a toothpick and all that. Are there any negative benefits? No. There are more negative benefits from not flossing. If you've got bits of food stuck in your teeth, then you're going to attract bacteria, and you're going to make the acidity around your pockets, not conducive to having your teeth stay in your gums. So what's happening is I'm trying to find something that looks like a tooth. If you've got a tooth and it's in a pocket here, and you're chewing and you're pushing, the gum will give you a very tight pocket. Okay, and that tooth's going to be in there solid. It's a bit like resistance training. You're working out your gums, you're working out everything. All right, so imagine if you didn't have all that chewing and you just had liquid, and that pocket doesn't need to be that tight. You're training that pocket to be loose. And that's why you get vegans with incredibly bad teeth. And that's actually a hip joint, but I was hiding that bit. So anyway, no negative benefits. There's more negative benefits from leaving bits of food in your teeth than there is to flossing. But yeah, I would recommend flossing personally if you're eating carnivore and your teeth are British. Right, I just want to point out Emma. Emma's one of my favourite people in the whole world, and she wants a Confer the Benefit T-shirt. So you're definitely onto something there, Rich. Definitely.
I can't take credit. Nick's idea. So
yeah, well, Nick it off Nick.
Yeah, we'll have to get some done.
Right, Landers has to say thank you. That's good. I have to say thank you to Richard and Stephen. Recommended electrolytes when starting the carnivore way of eating has kept my friend honest for the first 2 weeks. Yes. No, I mean, that's what I was trying to say about, micronutrients are really important. And if you're, low in those, you're going to have problems. Carnivore Muscle is putting in a few things here. Phil Escott, hello Phil, by the way. Herbert is apologizing for not being very precise. Right, I'm looking for another question. Vitalitis is saying thank you. That's very interesting about magnesium. What is the difference between potassium citrate and potassium gluconate? Is one more beneficial than the other? Richard.
Yeah, my preference is always citrate. And the reason being, it comes back to I don't want to say debate because we didn't really chat it through much of it, but we were fortunate to have the brilliant Sally K. Norton on a few months back. And I think we spent most of that session just her answering questions, wasn't it? But the reason for that was Cami was kind enough to get Sally K. Norton on, and it was to discuss oxalate detox. Stephen's new coin saying, also referred to as oxalate dumping. The tissues store oxalates over years and years and years, and cyclically they're released into the body, and they can cause lots of issues. So the argument is that we use calcium to bind to this oxalate and excrete it from the body. But I prefer the potassium approach. And the reason for that is that we are heavily devoid in potassium. The Stone Age man would consume around 15,000 milligrams of potassium per day. We do not hit anywhere near that. And it's something that Stephen and I have mentioned many times previously in regards to the mineral content being heavily devoid in animal proteins because of soil erosion and nutrient erosion and the treatment of the plants and grass being sprayed with toxic chemicals and so on and so forth. But the beauty with potassium citrate is we are replacing this amount. And if we look at an animal protein, a piece of beef or a piece of lamb, for example, we would think that they predominate sodium because we're in this society where we salt everything with sodium. But that's not true. If we look at the profile, potassium is 4 times higher than sodium, and then it drops down significantly down to magnesium, and then sometimes lower is calcium, but at least at best on par as a 1-to-1 ratio. But what do we do as a people? Well, we avoid potassium because we're told to avoid potassium. We put sodium in, which is fantastic because we need to avoid things like keto flu as insulin drops and so on and so forth. But sodium depletes potassium. So by adding in this extra sodium, we're depleting potassium. So we need to replace potassium. Well, why not replace it with potassium citrate? Because now we don't need to put this extra calcium in. Remember, as nature intended, calcium is very low. The issue with consuming too much calcium from a dietary perspective in regards to supplementation or even from food is that several studies have shown that increased calcium consumption can increase risk of cardiovascular disease by as much as 15%. That doesn't mean if you eat lots of calcium, you're going to get cardiovascular disease, but why contribute to it when nature intended for us not to consume much calcium past the age of infancy? So milk and eggs are the only two things that throw this ratio out of whack. But as carnivores, when we consume eggs, we consume an X amount of calcium, and a little bit is fine, and then we get the correct ratio of magnesium. But the potassium citrate, when we add this in, we're now binding to these oxalates, and we're allowing those to be excreted from the body. So for me, it confers a huge benefit for the citrate, and got to get that in of me. It's potassium was well underrated, and one of the issues that we face when we become carnivore is hypokalemia. with a K, which is low potassium. So we need potassium. Extra sodium's depleting the potassium. But what are we doing? Increasing the calcium. It just doesn't make sense when we take a step back and look at it from a simplistic view. Let's go back to how nature intended. This is why the citrate for me seems to be more beneficial than anything else. That's not to say that you can't use the other potassium, but why would you, if you put it in this potassium in, why wouldn't you want it to do two jobs in one go and bind to those oxalates and allow you to detox those oxalates efficiently and effectively? So that's why I consume an awful lot of potassium. Remember, 4-to-1 potassium to sodium.
I've got to unmute myself. I'm just trying to make sure that your sound is perfect, which it always is, Richard. Now, look, you wanted to answer a question about fiber. Let's do that now, because I think, I've rushed through a few answers. So let's get that in, and then we've got a few more questions.
Perfect. So look, in fact, I'm going to see if I can find something on my screen. Yesterday, is it here? Oh, do you know what? I can't find it. It's like so much things on my computer. I released a podcast yesterday with Dr. Zoe Harkum. And it was one of the questions that I asked her. And part of what I showed during that was that carbohydrates are not essential. Carbohydrates are deemed non-essential. And whether you want to believe that or not, this is a fact. The amount of carbohydrate required for life is 0. Why? Because the body makes all of the glucose that it needs. Carbohydrate breaks down into sugar, i.e. glucose, and the body makes glucose. We create this from lipid and protein through a process called gluconeogenesis. So we don't need carbohydrate. Fiber, dietary carbohydrate. That's right, dietary carbohydrate. So the body makes glucose, but we don't need any exogenous carbohydrate. Fiber is a subset of carbohydrate. Therefore, if we do not need carbohydrate, we do not need fiber. But what we're told in society is, you need fiber for a healthy gut microbiome. I hate to break this to you, and this is going to break your heart for anyone who's listening that eats lots of veggies. Fiber is an anti-nutrient. Everything you've been told about fiber is a lie created by the sugar industry, the food industry, and it does not confer any benefit at all. It aggravates the gut, the intestines, and it will lead to diverticulitis. Diverticulitis is an inflammatory condition which is caused by the fiber that you are consuming. So let's go back a couple of steps. We need fiber for a healthy gut microbiome. Now, the thinking behind this is that fiber breaks down into a short-chain fatty acid called butyrate, which it does. Butyrate feeds the carnocyte, which it does. Fantastic. But that butyrate, even in a non-ketogenic state, further breaks down into beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone body. If you are ketogenic or carnivore, you have beta-hydroxybutyrate running through your veins. Therefore, the blood supply within your body feeds every colonocyte within the gut, not just the colonocyte that short-chain fatty acid, the fiber, comes in contact with. So that's number one. Secondly is that butyrate is not the only short-chain fatty acid. There's lots of others, and meat provides things like isobutyrate, valerate, and propionate. All of these are short-chain fatty acids that we get from animal proteins. They are the same thing, the same item that this fiber breaks down to. You do not need fiber for short-chain fatty acids. Meats contain these short-chain fatty acids, and some studies have shown that they feed the colonocyte in the gut at a higher rate than the short-chain fatty acid from plants. So we don't need fiber. And alpha diversity of the gut microbiome has been shown to be higher from animal proteins than it has from plants. We do not need plants. Plants contain plant compounds, phytoalexins, plant toxins, plant defense chemicals. Now, whether you want to believe this or not either, plants do not contain an awful lot of vitamins and minerals. We're told to consume these 4 vitamins and minerals. And look, I'm going to break this down really quickly, but I think that is pertinent to the answer, because when you tell someone to take plants out of their diet, they look at you as if you have 2 heads. But if you suffer with any irritable bowel syndrome, diverticulitis. Fiber is one of the first things to go, and grains have to go. And I'll quickly mention this, and I'll circle back. Grains and plants are treated with toxic chemicals called glyphosate, herbicides. This is what kills off all the bugs and things that are trying to attack it. These things are known carcinogens. But anyway, beyond that, they are sprayed on the plants. This glyphosate blocks a pathway called PEP, phosphoenol pyruvate. Phosphoenol pyruvate is the input to the shikimate pathway. The shikimate pathway feeds the gut, and that's what allows us to create our aromatic amino acids and so on and so forth. These are our neurotransmitters. But PEP is blocked by glyphosate. Glyphosate blocks PEP, and it leads to this buildup. So PEP is an output of fructose absorption. When PEP is blocked, fructose builds up in the lower gut, and it leads to being fermented in the lower gut, and it will lead to IBS issues. And it will also travel to the liver and lead to fatty liver disease and increased triglycerides. This is what you get from eating lots of fructose, particularly fructans. So grains contain fructans. Fructans break down into fructose. And we get this from fruit also, but it's particularly high in grains. But this is why glyphosate from grains is particularly damaging, because it blocks that pathway and leads to this fructose buildup. IBS, IBD, all of these sorts of things are fructose malabsorption, the body's inability to process fructose. So if you're consuming grains that are treated with glyphosate that contain these toxic compounds, and this isn't even mentioning the lectins, wheat germagglutinin and phytohemagglutinin, which cause this intestinal permeability. This is a separate sort of thing. We could go off onto this for hours, I think. But those are two compounds. If you suffer with any irritable bowel disorder, if you suffer with diverticulitis, you need to remove all fiber and all grains from your diet. And try it. If you don't believe me, take it out. And you will notice within a few weeks that all of these issues that you've been suffering with for years and years and years have cleared up. Now, plants, they're meant to be incredible sources of nutrients, but they're not. It's all a fallacy. And in fact, I have this to hand really quickly, so I am going to share this part because this is really important. But basically, when we look at plant compounds, nutrients from plants in comparison to animal proteins, there's...
Can you share it, Rich?
Yeah, I am. I'm trying to speak while looking for it at the same time.
Oh, right. Sorry.
But apologies.
That's okay.
But let's look at... I'll start with vitamin A, and we'll break through.
While you're looking, I'm going to say something to give you a little bit of so you can do it. One of the things I find quite funny about the vegan argument about eating fiber and the fact that the gut bacteria can produce short-chain fatty acids is these are the same people that tell you that saturated fat is bad. And you get a little jaw-dropping moment when you say, you do realize that you have just recommended fiber because it makes saturated fat. Because a short-chain fatty acid is a saturated fat. So you can't on one hand say saturated fat is bad and then say, but fiber's good because it makes saturated fat. So it's not consistent. It's just ridiculous. So that was my little aside. And always, when we talk about carbohydrate, you don't need carbohydrate. Always add dietary carbohydrate, because people will say, but you do. I've read a book where it says you've got to have carbohydrate for this, carbohydrate for that. Yeah, your body makes it. That's the nuance that you must get to. That it is the body making it, demand driven. So it's not too much, it's not too little. The body knows what it's doing. You do not have to stuff carbohydrates into your face, because if you eat excess carbohydrates, the body will break it and turn some of it into fat. So it's just ridiculous to say that you have to eat carbohydrates. Right, here we go. Adding that to the stage. I hope that was good enough for you, Rich. Sorry, gave you a bit of...
Perfect. And as you rightly say, these guidelines have been written by the food industry with very little input from medical professionals or nutritional professionals. These guidelines were written by people from Coca-Cola and McDonald's and people who have vested interests in the food industry. All of that is available for you to watch on the podcast that I released last night with Zoe Harkum. It's doing really well for my channel. It's already on 1,500 views. Zoe Harcombe is one of the world's leading nutrition experts, an incredible podcast. So get on and watch that. But look, this is a simple graphic, and I'm looking at the graphic on the right-hand side. This is a description or breakdown of two so-called superfoods, blueberries and kale, i.e. vegetables and fruits. And then to the right-hand side of that line, we have animal proteins. Now, these are based on 100 grams, but we don't eat foods from nature per 100 grams. You know, we don't kill an animal and eat, all right, I'm going to weigh out 100 grams, because you wouldn't eat 100 grams of beef. You know, you'd probably eat 500 grams, or in my case, 1,000 grams. But 100 grams from kale is an awful lot of kale. You know, so we wouldn't eat these as this image suggests, but let's play it at its own game. Vitamin A, retinol. My mum used to tell me to eat carrots so I could see in the dark for vitamin A, for retinol. No plant contains retinol. There is no vitamin A in any plant or fruit. Fact. When someone tells you carrots or whatever it may be is a good source of vitamin A, it's a fallacy. Retinol only exists in animal proteins. These plants contain a precursor called beta-carotene. That is not vitamin A. That beta-carotene needs to be converted into retinol by an enzyme called BCMO. And in order to convert it, it's depleted by 21 times, making the amount converted close to zero. So there's no vitamin A in plants. B vitamins, which are essential for things like methylation, they're cofactors involved in the production of neurotransmitters. These things are essential for life. Look how many B vitamins are in plants. Thiamine, B1, almost non-existent. Riboflavin, B2, almost non-existent. Niacin, B3, almost non-existent. Vitamin B6, pyridoxine, almost non-existent. Biotin, folate. Yes, there's folate in plants, but guess what? There's tons more folate in beef liver and in eggs. Vitamin B12, cobalamin, does not exist in plants. You cannot get it from plants. And then we have vitamin C. Yes, plants contain vitamin C, but animal proteins also contain vitamin C. When people tell you that animal proteins do not, that is a fallacy. Plants do not contain vitamin D. Animal proteins contain vitamin D. And in fact, for us in the UK, where we don't get an awful lot of sunlight, we assimilate and process most of our vitamin D from animal proteins. Yes, we get it from the sun, but we are genetically predispositioned in order to upregulate the pathways in order to us to assimilate animal proteins or vitamin D from animal proteins. Vitamin E, yes, that's found in plants, incredibly low, but we also get plenty from animal proteins. Vitamin K. If you pick up a pack of kale in the supermarket, there is a stamp on there which says high or good source of vitamin K. This is a fallacy. Kale does not contain vitamin K. Kale contains K1. The human body needs K2. And again, in order to create this K2, we need to convert K1 into K2. And the body does it so inefficiently, close to zero is converted. Plants are just not a good source of nutrients. And in our pursuit, in order to hit these requirements that we would need to in order to hit these vitamins and minerals, we are consuming an awful lot of phytoalexins, these plant toxins, wheat germ agglutinin, phytohemagglutinin, so on and so forth, these oxalates and all of these other compounds, the fibrous compounds that are causing these issues. And then we look at things like choline, creatine, carnosine, carnitine, all of these things which are essential for life do not exist in plants. So we cannot get all of our nutrients from plants. It's impossible unless you supplement. But then supplementation, most supplements are made from plants. This is why when you consume an iron supplement, most of it comes out the other end because it's not absorbed. We need heme iron. We can't get iron. Popeye was wrong. We can't get enough iron from plants. Spinach contains non-heme iron. The human body needs heme iron. So whatever reason it is that you eat plants, whether you like them or not, that fiber is not causing you any benefit. It's not conferring any benefit. It's doing nothing but causing issues. Those lectins, those oxalates, those phytates, these toxic compounds, these isoflavones, and so on and so forth. These plants contain toxic compounds. Whether you want to believe this or not, the best way to tell, remove them from your diet. And I promise within 2 to 3 weeks, you will be messaging me saying how much better you feel from taking them out. I don't eat plants. I ate plants at Christmas time for a Christmas dinner because my little girl wanted me to enjoy a Christmas dinner with her. Beyond that, I haven't eaten plants for 4 or 5 years, and I've eaten very little plant or fruit in the last 10, 11 years. And I'm thriving. People all over the world are thriving through removing these toxic compounds. You do not need plants. Don't fall into the trap in believing that vegetables are good for you. If you want to consume them, that's fine. But you need to be educated and understand that they are not helping your IBS, your IBD, this irritable bowel syndrome, any gastro distress, diverticulitis. These compounds are detrimental to your health. You need to remove them. And when you do, you're going to confer a huge benefit.
Great. Thank you, Richard.
Rant over.
That's great. Well, yeah, I could tell it was a bit of a rant. We've got some questions. Jonathan's got a couple. So because we speak to Jonathan in the week, can we just be very brief on this and then he can follow it? For Richard, out of curiosity, did you find a decent scale weight drop following a fat refeed in your last contest?
Did I see? Can you put it back up? Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, of course can. Did you get a decent scale weight drop following a fat refeed in your last contest?
So no, I mean, what I would typically do is I would remove fat for a week or two, which isn't healthy. And look, I'm not do not do this if you are living this lifestyle for health reasons. This was to compete in British and European championships at a pro level. I took fat out of my diet in order to ramp up my body's ability to deplete stored body fat. And this is what allowed me to achieve 2 and 3% body fats. I would put the refeed back in about 4 days out. So I would have 1 to 2 days of incredibly high saturated fats because they store better in the body. I wouldn't eat the fats from omega-3s or from MCTs because these are too quick to be used for energy, and they're excreted from the body incredibly quickly. So saturated fat. So I would refeed with the fat. I would gain 7 pounds from a fat refeed within 2 days. So I wouldn't lose weight. I would gain weight, on the last 2 or 3 days before competition. 2 days out, then I would implement a carb refeed. Don't shoot me. It's the only time of the year that I would put carb in. I would put it in from white rice or from things like Rice Krispies, things that are going to be low in lectins. White rice is lectin free, or at least as close to lectin free as you can get. And I would put this in, and I would consume around 900 grams of carbs a day for 2 or 3 days, and I would gain a further 7 pounds. So I would gain 17 pounds at the top end within 3 to 4 days before going on stage. When you put this in from a tight frame, when you're incredibly lean, veins and muscles pop and bulge everywhere. So I would do it for the opposite. I wouldn't notice a fat drop because I wasn't using it for that reason. You can see a fat drop if you implement it close, a bit further away from comp day. And even if you do play around with carbohydrates, sometimes you notice that you put carb in and you would think that they're going to store in the body. And sometimes that can elicit a further activation of insulin and speed processes up and allow you to lose weight. So you can do, but yeah, I wouldn't use it for that purpose, but it'd be great. We need to get that podcast sorted in regards to training and competing, because I think that'll be a fantastic podcast, Jonathan.
Right, Metastic says, sorry to go on, I keep asking this, but can the oxalate detox last up to 7 days per cycle? Just still working out if my symptoms are the detox or something else. Yeah, Metastic. I mean, you can have a month of an oxalate detox. It can be quite horrible, as Sally K. Norton attested to. So, yes. Right, another question here. I think that's just Jonathan again, so I think we'll skip that one because I want to get to this. Is cheese a good source of vitamin K2, especially as we just spoke about it? Vitamin K2, yeah, cheese is a really good source. Fermented cheese is particularly good. Gouda, Edam, and Brie. So yeah, you can get K2 from cheese. That's really good. Here we go. Not digressing. Removing just grains alone. Bought my PSA. Down from 5.9 to 3.7 in just 3 months. Nothing more powerful than anecdotal evidence. Yes, I mean, when we get onto the other channel, I might talk about somebody reducing their oxidized LDL with a biohack. Here is another question. We're coming up to the last 5 minutes, and we will be on the other platform that rhymes with Apple Crumble, and we'll put the link in a minute. Andre, when would you consider using the calories in, calories out model when trying to lose body fat? I'm now at the end of week 11 strict carnivore diet and have not lost any fat in almost 4 weeks. What would you guys do? Thanks. Very quick answer from me would be you could increase your fats and see what happens. Fats to protein ratio, you could try that, or you could try lean proteins and see what that works. So whatever you're doing, shift the needle one way or the other, and for about 3-4 weeks, see what happens. Certainly wouldn't use calories in, calories out. I think that's just, not going to confer any benefit for you. I think just changing your macros around. Personally, with stools, normally with older women, real generalization, higher fats tends to work. Not always. And with men, tends to be going leaner tends to work. That's just a generalization, and different people will have different results. But the only way to really know for you personally is to do it yourself, I think. Right. I think we're pretty much done. Well done on the stuff about fiber, Rich. That was really good. And I liked your rant. Just for everyone to know, thank you. We've got over 100 people viewing right now, which is really good. So that's the second week running that's happened. If you want to get your questions answered, you can try either doing the super chat, which helps us pay the mortgage and gets your question answered first. So no one's needed to do that tonight. As you can see, we try to do it without you needing the super chat. If you appreciate our efforts, you can also do it just for the fun of it. We are on another platform where we can talk a bit more freely about certain things that the World Health Organization don't want us to talk about. But things like what Richard just said from his podcast with Zoe Harcum, if you're really fascinated, you should definitely check out his channel. Definitely have a look at Zoe. She's fantastic. These are the hard facts that we are being lied to. I mean, that's a fact. We have to be careful what we say, but we're definitely being lied to about what foods are good for us, because there's no way honey nut Cheerios are healthier than an egg. Just no way on earth. And I think when they did that, the Tufts thing, when they did the chart, and meat, eggs, fish were much, much lower than cereals and candy bars and stuff like that. You've got to realize that is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. So with that in mind, I will let Richard have a little couple of minutes to say goodbye to everyone that's watched and thank everybody, and I will put in the chat where to go to next.
Fantastic. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, a few things. Stephen and I have a private group on Mighty Networks. Steve will pop a group in there now while I'm chatting away. Feel free to join that. It's free to join. Stephen and I go live in there every Monday. So tomorrow at 5 p.m, it's a Zoom call. So you can come on there and ask questions in person. You can turn your camera off, or you can even type questions, but it's a fantastic way to pop questions in there and to build the community and help each other with advice and things. We also go live now and again. I think Stephen's no longer going to participate due to being so busy with other things, but Jonathan, who's on the chat, does the Carnivore Team GB live every Tuesday. So I'll be in there this Tuesday. I think Andrew Scarborough is also attending that. We have an event, Stephen and I believe Jonathan, Phil Escott and Ben are all speaking at the War on Health conference at the end of March. So that's a fantastic conference to attend. So take a look at that, War on Health. And there's also the Public Health Collaboration, which at least Stephen and I are going. I'm not sure about the other guys, but we will be attending that on the 27th, 28th, or is it the 28th, 29th, and 30th of May. That's a fantastic conference, I believe. I may be wrong. Just Google.
I think you're wrong. There you go. I think you're wrong, but we'll look that up later.
Yeah,
might be the 18th. That seems to ring a bell for me.
Okay. It's in May. Google the PHC. So that's going to be a fantastic conference. Dr. Anthony Chafee and Ken Berry are going to be there. Fantastic opportunities. But also, the War on Health. I mean, get in there. We are going to be there speaking. And that's it. That's it for me. Thank you all for watching. It's fantastic to see the numbers growing. And we will see you on that other channel that rhymes with Apple Crumble in 20 to 30 seconds. Thank you all.
Yeah. The link is in the chat. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye bye, YouTubers.